Washington, D.C. hadn't seen this kind of political tension since the days of the Mueller investigation. The year was 2025 and the atmosphere was electric. With President Donald Trump back in the Oval Office for his second term, the political battlefield had reignited. His surprise appointment of Pam Bondi as the United States Attorney General had turned heads and turned up the heat on Capitol Hill. Pam Bondi was known for her fiery courtroom presence and no-nonsense approach to corruption. Now she had the full force of the Justice Department behind her. One of her first missions to root out the remnants of what many Trump loyalists called the swamp. At the center of the storm was Representative Jerry Nadler, a longtime Democratic congressman from New York and one of Trump's fiercest critics during his first presidency. Nadler had once led impeachment hearings against Trump. Now the tables had turned. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about misappropriation of government funds in a New York transportation initiative that Nadler had championed. Whispers about backdoor contracts, shell companies, and hidden donors had reached the desk of Bondi. But it wasn't until a key whistleblower, a former aide to Nadler, approached the Justice Department that Bondi decided to act. At a hastily arranged press briefing on the steps of the DOJ, Pam Bondi didn't mince words. The American people deserve transparency. No matter how long someone has served in Congress, no one is above the law. We are investigating serious allegations involving Representative Jerry Nadler and a network of financial misconduct that stretches across multiple federal grant programs. The media exploded. CNN called it a political hit job. Fox News hailed it as finally some accountability. But Bondi? She didn't flinch. That same day, she subpoenaed dozens of records from Nadler's office and issued a deadline of 72 hours for compliance. Inside the Capitol, Nadler fumed. "This is a disgrace," he barked at reporters as he walked briskly toward his office, trailed by aides. Pam Bondi is nothing more than Donald Trump's political attack dog. These allegations are baseless. It's an attempt to silence dissent in Washington. But behind his bluster, Nadler knew things were about to get serious. That whistleblower? He remembered her, a quiet, observant intern who worked on his urban development subcommittee for nearly 2 years. He had overlooked her, and that was a mistake. Meanwhile, Bondi had assembled a war room inside the DOJ, top financial crimes prosecutors, forensic accountants, cyber analysts, and political corruption experts. This wasn't just an investigation, it was a full-scale takedown. By the third day, the DOJ team had already uncovered a network of over a dozen consulting firms tied to Nadler's New York infrastructure programs. One firm, registered in Delaware, had no office, no staff, and no website, yet it had received $3.8 million in federal funds. Bondi stood before the investigative board and pointed at the screen. "This is fraud. Pure and simple. And we are going to dismantle every last thread." The clock was ticking. Nadler was preparing for a primetime press conference to clear his name, but Bondi had other plans. That night, she called a surprise late-night session with Trump in the White House. Security footage showed her arriving just past 11 p.m. She was ushered straight to the Oval Office. Behind closed doors, Bondi laid it all out. "Mr. President, it's worse than we thought. Nadler's not just involved, he's orchestrated a decade-long pipeline of federal money into shady nonprofits that link all the way back to New York political PACs. We've traced connections to at least 3 other Democratic members of Congress." Trump leaned back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. "Good. Let's drain the rest of the swamp." Pam nodded. "Sir, this might shake Washington to its core." "Let it shake," Trump said. "Let it fall apart. America needs to see it." As Bondi left the White House and disappeared into the night, she knew the next step was risky, but necessary. Tomorrow, she would confront Jerry Nadler head-on in a live televised hearing that would capture the attention of the entire country. It was a brisk Thursday morning when the nation's attention turned toward the Capitol. News tickers across the country flashed one headline: "Bondi versus Nadler, Live Showdown." Networks cleared their schedules. Social media was on fire. America was about to witness something rare, a sitting U.S. Attorney General confronting a senior congressman in a public House Oversight Committee hearing. The chamber was packed. Reporters elbowed each other for seats. Flashbulbs burst as Pam Bondi walked in, calm and collected, clad in a navy blue power suit, a thick manila folder clutched in her hand. Behind her, members of her DOJ task force took their places. At the opposite end sat Jerry Nadler, flanked by Democratic allies, trying his best to project confidence. But his usual fire seemed subdued. His eyes flicked toward the cameras, then to Bondi. She met his gaze cold, unshaken. Chairman Matt Gaetz banged the gavel. This hearing will come to order. What followed was nothing short of political theater. Nadler launched the first salvo. Attorney General Bondi, this hearing is a gross overreach. The Department of Justice under your leadership has become a political weapon for the president. I won't stand for this witch hunt. Pam didn't flinch. Congressman, with all due respect, the evidence isn't a witch hunt. It's a roadmap, one that leads straight to your doorstep. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Bondi calmly opened her folder and began to read. On March 12, 2023, a federal grant for $7.5 million was allocated to the New Urban Progress Initiative, a nonprofit based in Brooklyn. Our investigation reveals that the organization never existed outside of a single UPS mailbox. Yet the grant was approved, funds were dispersed, and those funds were then funneled into several shell companies, one of which paid for a luxury condo in Midtown Manhattan. The condo is owned by your cousin, David Nadler. Nadler's face turned crimson. I had no knowledge of that transaction. Pam interrupted. Then perhaps you can explain why your signature appears on the original funding request and follow-up authorization, Congressman? She raised a blown-up copy of the document for the cameras to see. Nadler's signature was unmistakable. The room went silent. Bondi continued. This is just one of over 12 instances we've traced where federal money ended up in the pockets of individuals or entities connected to you. And I haven't even touched the campaign finance irregularities yet. Nadler shifted in his seat. His allies looked increasingly uncomfortable. You're twisting this. Pam shut him down again. I'm presenting facts. Cold, hard, documented facts. She reached into her folder again. And here's a fun one. A company named Empire Data Analytics received $1.2 million in consulting fees for a digital infrastructure audit in 2022. That company has no employees, no physical address, and shares a phone number with your re-election campaign's office. Congressman, why is the DOJ finding your fingerprints on federal money routed to ghost companies? Nadler stammered. Those were independent vendors. That you personally approved. Bondi replied, voice sharp. Mr. Nadler, you've been in Washington for decades. Perhaps you assumed no one would ever dig deep enough. Well, we did. And now the American people know. The silence was deafening. One by one, even some Democrats sitting nearby lowered their eyes. The chairman leaned forward, clearly shaken. Are you saying the Attorney General's office is preparing charges? Pam didn't hesitate. We are exploring multiple avenues, including wire fraud, misuse of federal funds, obstruction of justice, and campaign finance violations. This is not political, Mr. Chairman. This is criminal. The hearing was suddenly paused as a commotion erupted outside. Protesters on both sides were shouting. But inside the chamber, it was clear. Nadler had just taken a hit that would be hard to recover from. Later that evening, cable news anchors couldn't keep up. CNN. Pam Bondi overreaches in dramatic hearing. Fox News. Bombshell. Nadler exposed in stunning DOJ takedown. Twitter/X. Hashtag Pam Bondi was right and hashtag Nadlergate both trended within the hour. But it wasn't the headlines that mattered, it was what came next. Because as night fell over D.C., Pam Bondi was already back at DOJ headquarters preparing her next move. Nadler's empire had cracks, and she was ready to bring the whole house down. The morning after the explosive hearing, Washington, D.C. woke up different. Coffee shops buzzed with talk of Pam Bondi. Morning radio hosts across the country had a field day playing clips of her grilling Jerry Nadler. Even in Democratic strongholds like San Francisco and Chicago, headlines asked the unthinkable, is Nadler finished? But things were about to go from bad to devastating. At 10:13 a.m. an anonymous leak hit the inboxes of major news outlets and congressional offices. It included 87 pages of internal emails, bank statements, and meeting logs, all pointing to an intricate web of backdoor deals involving Nadler, his staffers, and a network of consultants, tied to a handful of high-earning political action committees. The subject line of the email? You wanted receipts. Here they are. A patriot who's had enough. The documents were damning. One email showed Nadler's top aide writing, "Don't worry, Jerry. Empire Data will cycle the funds just like last time. We'll route through the pack before the quarterly filing. Clean." Another thread between Nadler and a real estate developer included a jaw-dropping line. "Consider the Midtown project greenlit, just remember who signs off your zoning exception." Within hours, the leak went viral. Major anchors were left speechless live on air. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow blinked at her screen, then simply said, "This is not good." But the most shocking piece of evidence? A voice recording allegedly between Nadler and a mysterious donor where Nadler said, "We keep the funding loop going, everyone stays happy. And if the DOJ sniffs too close, we spin the Trump witch hunt line. It always works." Pam Bondi, sitting in her 8th-floor office at DOJ headquarters, leaned back in her chair as the file played. She smiled. "He just handed us everything we need." That afternoon, Bondi convened a closed-door emergency briefing with senior DOJ officials. The message was clear. "We're done playing games. Prepare to issue indictments." Inside Nadler's camp, panic mode. Meanwhile, inside Nadler's office, chaos reigned. Aides shouted across rooms. Lawyers were on speakerphones, flipping through files. One senior aide openly wept as reporters camped outside. Nadler paced furiously, his hands trembling. Find out who leaked it. Was it the intern? The consultant from Albany? Find them. But there was no time. Word had just come in that the House Ethics Committee had opened its own parallel investigation. The FBI had arrived at the Midtown condo mentioned in the leak. And Nadler's re-election campaign treasurer had just resigned. By sunset, 3 Democratic House members who had been allies of Nadler quietly distanced themselves, releasing vague statements calling for integrity and transparency. President Trump responds. At a primetime press event on the White House lawn, President Trump addressed the matter with his signature flair. Pam Bondi is doing an incredible job. You're seeing the truth now, all of it. Nadler and his pals thought they could run the swamp forever. Well, we're cleaning it up. One rat at a time. The crowd of reporters erupted in questions, but Trump waved them off. There's more to come. Stay tuned. Pam's next move, a grand jury. Late that night, Pam Bondi filed paperwork to convene a federal grand jury to review the evidence for formal charges. If approved, this would be the most serious legal action ever taken against a sitting senior congressman in over 4 decades. As news spread, social media lit up again. Hashtag Nadler leaks. Hashtag Bondi storm. Hashtag drain it all. Even Elon Musk tweeted, "Wow. Didn't expect Bondi to come in swinging like this. Swamp may finally be drying up." But Pam wasn't finished. At 2:11 a.m. she sent a direct message to her team. Issue subpoenas for Nadler's campaign staff. I want everyone in the loop. No immunity deals. No exceptions. Back in his penthouse, Nadler sat alone, glass of bourbon untouched, staring at his television. Every channel bore his face. Every anchor said the same word, indictment. He reached for his phone. A name hovered on the screen. Pam Bondi. He didn't dial. He knew it was already too late. By sunrise, Washington was bracing for impact. The Department of Justice had just confirmed what everyone had suspected for days. A federal grand jury was officially seated. The target, Congressman Jerry Nadler. The lead prosecutor? None other than Pam Bondi herself. Bondi stepped before the cameras that morning and delivered a chillingly composed statement from the steps of the DOJ. Public servants must be held to the highest standards. When those entrusted with our laws choose to violate them, the consequences must be swift and severe. No one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. Those words echoed through every office, every studio, every living room in America. But Nadler wasn't going down without a fight. He held his own press conference at noon, defiant. This is a political witch hunt. This is Donald Trump and his puppet attorney general using the DOJ to target opponents. I will fight this until the very end. I will not resign. But as the minutes passed, the facade began to crumble. Pam Bondi's next strike hit harder than anyone expected. Just 2 hours after Nadler's press conference, 2 of his senior staffers were arrested by federal agents on charges of obstruction of justice and destruction of government property. DOJ sources confirmed that one of them had attempted to shred documents related to Empire Data Analytics just days before the subpoena hit. The arrests were captured on live TV. CNN's camera crew zoomed in as black SUVs rolled up to a D.C. brownstone. Agents in Navy windbreakers marched out with boxes of evidence and laptops. Inside the Capitol, panic turned to silence. More lawmakers began contacting their own lawyers. Emails were deleted. Meetings were postponed. Some even canceled international travel plans, fearing they'd be next. Meanwhile, Bondi was just getting started. The hidden informant. That night, Fox News dropped a bombshell. Tucker Carlson, now broadcasting through his independent platform, revealed that a former Nadler aide had flipped. He had been wearing a wire for weeks, feeding the DOJ information about meetings, internal cover-ups, and shady PAC arrangements. Pam Bondi's strategy isn't just tough, it's brilliant, Tucker said. She's playing chess. Nadler? He's playing checkers with half the pieces missing. According to leaked transcripts, Nadler had openly joked about milking the PACs and even boasted that no one's gonna dig that deep. That informant's cooperation had given Bondi the key, the full roadmap to the swamp's darkest corners. By the next morning, 8 additional subpoenas had been issued to other figures across Nadler's political ecosystem. One of them? A lobbyist with deep ties to multiple progressive organizations. Another? A former New York City official who had coordinated real estate deals tied to federal housing grants Nadler allegedly redirected. With Bondi circling, longtime D.C. insiders began retreating into the shadows. Private security firms were being hired. Phones were wiped clean. And donors, once loyal to Nadler, began issuing statements of deep concern and withdrawing support pending clarity. One of the most stunning betrayals came from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who tweeted, "Corruption, wherever it exists, must be rooted out. If the evidence is real, Nadler must be held accountable. Justice should not have a party." That tweet alone sent shockwaves through the Democratic establishment. The message was clear, Nadler was now on his own. And Pam Bondi? She was just locking in her final move. Late that evening, as journalists chased rumors across the Capitol, Bondi's office released one final notice to the press. A formal indictment of Representative Nadler is expected within 48 hours. All findings will be presented to the grand jury. No further comments at this time. Across America, reactions were fierce. In Middle America, Bondi was hailed as a hero. Truck stops, diners, and town halls erupted in support. Conservative influencers flooded social media with praise. She's got more guts than the last 3 AGs combined. Finally, someone is putting the corrupt on notice. Pam Bondi for President 2028? Even traditionally neutral outlets like Reuters and NPR admitted. Bondi's evidence appears overwhelming and Nadler's political future looks bleak. But the final nail was yet to be driven. Behind closed doors, Pam Bondi was preparing for the most televised indictment in modern American history. Her office knew it had to be airtight, irrefutable, and unstoppable. And as the final pieces clicked into place, one of her aides turned to her and asked, "Ma'am, are you ready for the firestorm this will unleash?" Pam Bondi looked out the window, her voice firm. "Let it burn. The swamps had it coming for a long time." 48 hours later, the nation was glued to their screens. Every major network had gone live. The banner read, "Breaking, U.S. Representative Jerry Nadler indicted." Pam Bondi stepped up to the podium in the DOJ press room. Her hair perfectly set, voice calm as ever, she held up a thick stack of papers, the official indictment, before speaking the words that echoed across America. Today, the United States Department of Justice has charged Representative Gerald Nadler with conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of office, obstruction of justice, and violation of campaign finance laws. This indictment is not about party. It's not about politics. It's about corruption. The American people deserve honesty. They deserve leaders who work for them, not for backroom deals and personal gain. With those words, it was done. Jerry Nadler, one of the longest-serving, most powerful Democrats in Congress, was formally charged by a federal grand jury under the leadership of a fearless attorney general appointed by President Donald Trump. Within hours, Nadler's House seat was suspended pending investigation and his office was sealed. 3 weeks later, the trial began. Cameras were not allowed inside, but every word of the proceedings leaked out like wildfire. Witness after witness came forward, former aides, PAC managers, donors, and even that mysterious informant who wore the wire. The defense? Weak and desperate. They tried to paint Bondi as a partisan attack dog, but the evidence was ironclad. Emails, voice recordings, bank transfers, and surveillance footage painted a picture of a man who had played the system for years and finally lost. The most dramatic moment came when Bondi herself took the stand to walk the jury through the evidence. This wasn't one bad decision. It was a pattern. A strategy. He believed he'd never be caught. That's the most dangerous kind of corruption, the kind wrapped in arrogance. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as she concluded. No one is immune. No one is untouchable. The jury deliberated just 8 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. Nadler was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, fined $6 million, and banned from holding public office for life. But the trial wasn't just about Nadler. Pam Bondi's investigation had kicked off a tidal wave of accountability. Over the next few months, 6 congressional staffers were indicted. 2 super PACs were shut down permanently. Several top donors were exposed for laundering money through political loopholes. It wasn't just Nadler who fell, it was a whole network. Some called it a political purge. Others called it justice finally served. Pam Bondi became a household name not just among conservatives but across the political spectrum. Even critics couldn't deny the magnitude of what she had accomplished. Her approval rating soared. She appeared on every major Sunday show, refusing to gloat but making one thing clear. This wasn't about me. This was about the American people reclaiming their government. In rallies across the country, Trump praised her as the greatest attorney general this country has ever seen. A new chant echoed at Trump rallies. Bondi, Bondi, Bondi. There was even talk of a future Bondi Trump ticket in 2028. In the months that followed, legislation was passed to tighten campaign finance laws. Whistleblower protections were expanded. Oversight committees got new powers to investigate corruption. The Bondi Doctrine, as it came to be known, was now the gold standard for how to take on political fraud without fear or favoritism. Pam Bondi had done what few before her dared. She didn't just talk about draining the swamp, she turned on the pump and let it roar. And as she walked through the marble halls of the DOJ, briefcase in hand, reporters called out, "What's next for you, Attorney General?" She paused, smiled, and replied, "Whatever it takes. We're not done yet." Cue the thunderous applause from patriotic Americans watching at home. Because in this chapter of American history, the swamp didn't just shake. It cracked. And Pam Bondi lit the match.